Before we begin, the ongoing genocide in Gaza has been going for nearly 2 years at time of recording, and it shows no signs of slowing down. Hello, editing nearly a film critic here. So I'm just pausing this very briefly to say that I recorded this back in September, and while I take the ceasefire about as seriously as Israel seems to be taking the ceasefire, there was a ceasefire called in the time it took me to finally edit this full video. Usually I'd leave an addendum or a note or something, but I feel like I should probably give more of a verbal context for this, because this may come up every now and again in a couple of things, how long ago I recorded this video. So yeah, just dropping and say that, and back to what you're saying. Linked below will be links to the Palestinian Children's Relief Fund, as well as the Boycott, Divestment, Sanctions campaign. It should also be mentioned that there's kind of a conflict of interest when it comes to BDS and me even talking about this film, because The Lion King is obviously a Disney property, and Disney Plus is officially on the BDS target list. Last time I tried to explain this, and this is before it was officially on the BDS list, it was on their pressure targets. I'll link it below. You can go over what all this stuff means. But last time I did mention it, it took up a sizable chunk of me talking, and it was mostly what everyone already talked about in the comments. So to avoid that, pinned comment will be my full breakdown of this. Do not purchase Disney Plus. Do not subscribe to it. I know it seems like there's only very little we can do, but every little we can do means the world. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free.
In April 1945, the partisans took over Milan. 2 days later, they arrived in the small town where I was living at the time. It was a moment of joy. The main square was crowded with people singing and waving flags, calling in loud voices for Mimo, the partisan leader of that area. A former maresciallo of the Carabinieri, Mimo joined the supporters of General Badoglio, Mussolini's successor, and lost a leg during one of the first clashes with Mussolini's remaining forces. Mimo showed up on the balcony of the city hall, pale, leaning on his crutch, and with one hand tried to calm the crowd. I was waiting for his speech because my whole childhood had been marked by the great historic speeches of Mussolini, whose most significant passages we memorized in school. Silence. Mimo spoke in a hoarse voice, barely audible. He said, "Citizens, friends, after so many painful sacrifices, here we are. Glory to those who have fallen for freedom." And that was it. He went back inside. The crowd yelled, the partisans raised their guns and fired festive volleys. We kids hurried to pick up the shells, precious items, but I had also learned that freedom of speech means freedom from rhetoric.
You guys ever see that whole Lion King film? It's pretty good. I like it. It's kind of brought back into limelight last year, not only just because of the 30th anniversary, but we got a prequel to the live-action remake that everyone loved, including myself. Hell, it's been on Disney Plus for like a few months now. I'm very good at striking when the iron is hot, as you can tell. Well, who gives a fuck about that horse shit? Well, I do a little. I'll be doing a companion piece talking about my thoughts of Mufasa that should be on my blog. This won't be the video. We are here to talk about the original 1994 animated movie. And depending on how incendiary I decided to make the title of this, you'll already know what precise question I am looking at as we move forward. Is the Lion King fascist? I don't know. This guy seems to think so.
A story of struggle and friendship and justice and revolution and rigid caste systems and knowing your place and the glory of monarchy.
This is a talking point that has come up recently, and when I say recently, I mean 1996 was like the earliest source I could find discussing this idea 2 years after the movie came out. So don't come to me saying that I just came up with this problem out of nowhere. This wokeness has seeped into it from the very starty little shits. It became a discourse again with the 2019 movie, where a fray of Fox News talking heads treated us like it was the herald of the end times.
Who knew? I'm actually just so pleased that for the last 3 years, every American slightly to the right of Hillary Clinton has been called a fascist. Now we're in the same company as a beloved Disney cartoon character.
This was also around the time I saw several prominent YouTubers make declarations that because of the Disney remake's propensity to move the more magical qualities out of their animated movies, it made these issues a lot more apparent.
Take, for instance, The Lion King, a story about how divine right birthright monarchy is not only good, but divine by nature, and also about how segregation is probably best for everybody. Now, these themes are there in the original, but given that the original elevates itself into this magical, emotional realm, it just reads differently than the remake, which is run through this hyperrealism sterilization filter. It also kind of doubles down on the whole race mixing is bad thing. It can't just be this obscure nature is mad at the disruption of the natural order as it was in the original. The text has to explain why the hyenas are bad for the Pride Lands. It has to justify why they are naturally worse than lions.
See, when you take the mysticism and divinity away from Simba, take away the feeling that he represents a benevolent order enforced by nature itself, all you're left with is an unnecessary monarchy. Watching this movie, sure, I want to get rid of Scar, but I don't have any particular attachment to Simba's power either. It doesn't seem so great.
All due respect to these creators, and as if I'm holding them to opinions they've had like over half a decade ago, does it? And like these videos, again, like they just got me on this train of thought like 6 years ago, so now I'm making the video. I take too long to do everything. I think The Lion King having fascist undertones, or people reading fascist undertones into it, has been a topic of contention for long enough that I want to ask why. Not through the 2019 remake, not through the spin-offs, not through the various sequels, no, just the original. So if you feel my points are being contradicted by, I don't know, information revealed in The Lion Guard, let's just pretend these don't exist as I go on. How will this be done? How will this be proven? Well, let's go back to the originator of the quote that was used to open this essay. Or fascism, for the uninitiated and for those who think a bread tube is a baking channel, is a 1995 essay by Italian philosopher Umberto Eco. It was essentially a warning of the unspoken ways fascistic rhetoric and beliefs creep into society, as it's a political ideology bred on subterfuge and denial of intent. It is a holy text of pretentious pinko video essayists, but also an essential and frankly worryingly prescient guide for noticing the slow pull of this ideology onto a population. These ideas and these characteristics were pulled from Eco's own childhood under Mussolini's rule. And yes, I am using it to analyze a 30-year-old children's cartoon film to see if it has nefarious undertones. This is the video you clicked on, and you cannot look away. You are in my grasp. Okay, so quick caveats, as I am bringing up the idea that a beloved film, seminal to a lot of people's childhoods, has some negative political intent. I want to get a few things out of the way. No, the cast and crew may not have had any idea what they were writing and how the hodgepodge of ideas that created this movie would be interpreted in this way. No, the villain's goose-stepping in one scene does not invalidate my entire video. But thank you for pointing this out as if I haven't seen the fucking movie before. No, you are not a bad person if you like The Lion King. Cards on the table, this is like top 3 Disney animated movies for me. I saw it at 4 in the Capitol with my dad. Both those things are gone now. It's the first one I have ever seen on the big screen. This movie means a lot to me. I love it dearly. It does not make it immune to critique and analysis, but it also means you can not analyze it, not care at all, and still be absolved of your moral purity if you push back on instinct, my even bringing this up. Because if I think you're a bad person, I think I'm a bad person. And I can assure you, my bad personage has nothing to do about a movie I like. While I don't like the mimetic way people use this, that might be a topic for another video actually, but don't hold your breath on the rate I make these. We'll all be dead before it gets on this channel. All art is political. Film is inherently political, which means it interacts with political dimensions in ways the artist may not have even intended, because these things are not made in bubbles that are never burst by the absolute arse-aching nightmare that is the world we have constructed. If you can deal with all of that, let us continue. If you can't deal with that, feel free to cut this part out of context if you wish to crucify me. This movie is evil and fascist to its core, and turning children into far-right Trump voting reprobates. And this is an undeniable thing, and I fully believe this, and think the movie and movies like this should be banned for the good of humanity. Have fun, babes. Like, with how small this channel is, it's super unlikely this will actually get the reaction I'm expecting it in this. But watch it just be the one video that gets everyone's attention and everyone angry with me. Okay, so there are 14 points Echo outlines to watch out for if a culture succumbs to fascistic ideology. Which works for me because it means I don't have to read anything because reading is hard. I will outline each point individually. Keep in mind this will be truncated as they tend to go on and we just need to get the gist. I do recommend reading Echo's essay in full. If you haven't, I will link it below. It's not very long.
This new culture had to be syncretistic. Syncretism is not only, as the dictionary says, the combination of different forms of belief or practice, such a combination must tolerate contradictions. Each of the original messages contains a sliver of wisdom, and whenever they seem to say different or incompatible things, it is only because all are alluding, allegorically, to the same primeval truth. As a consequence, there can be no advancement of learning. Truth has already been spelled out once and for all, and we can only keep interpreting its obscure message.
Lion King's one of those rare films, especially film that's, intended for children or, all ages, family. Films, because I know people don't like being that's another discussion for another video I will never make, that actually has a philosophical viewpoint directly stated by the character. It has more than one even. One of them you probably remember as it's blared to you in the opening. It's the circle of life. Mufasa explains this as the cyclical nature of how their rule works. Lions keep the order and presumably pick off their subjects, but they will die and become the grass that sustains their herbivore prey. Foolproof! Hopefully he doesn't die in a fucking rock-infested gorge where they cannot possibly decompose into grass. I guess the vultures kept up that circle. Because, if you're over 5, you can see this is a shit deal for the prey no matter how you look at it. And look at the lyrics. There's far too much to take in here. More than found, they can ever be found. But the sun rolling high through the sapphire sky keeps great and small on the endless mound. It's the circle of life. You try not singing it. Reading this cynically, you could argue it's telling the small to stay in their place. They can't really do shit all of all the things to do after all. Hakuna Matata. Speaking of, that's another philosophy you get. Timon and Pumbaa's mantra of life. Life sucks, but just ignore it and you'll be fine.
When the world turns its back on you, you turn your back on the world.
Hey, doesn't that go against Simba's arc entirely of facing the responsibilities of his past and confront the pain of his father's death? Yes, absolutely. The movie never acknowledges it, and the duo will remain in Simba's inner circle at the end of the film. Now, I don't think Simba's gay dad, look, I've pissed off enough people by bringing the fashion stuff up, I might as well go for broke here, love is love, should be exiled for anything. But this film could acknowledge it contradicts the main philosophy of the movie. But does it? Because the circle of life sure seems to tell you, fuck it and everything will be fine, actually. The movie itself mashes up seemingly contradictory ethos to try to form a coherent whole. As for the circle of life, the idea that lions with crowns are part of this kind of great equalizing circle may not be the case. Mufasa tells Simba that the great kings, their ancestors, are looking down on them. This is reinforced somewhat by Simba seeing his father in the clouds. Now, I ragged on Lindsay and Joel about insinuating the 2019 film removing the magical realism in order to satisfy Favreau's fetishism with hyper-realism makes the film feel more fashy, but I'd honestly argue the magical elements makes it more. Because if Simba really saw his dad in that moment, these guys have power from beyond the fucking grave. The circle of life for D, eternal fucking rule by keeping our tradition intact for us. You want to oppose this? Okay, enjoy drought, fuckers. So yeah, point for this is absolutely a cult of tradition. Next.
Even though Nazism was proud of its industrial achievements, its praise of modernism was only the surface of an ideology based upon blood and earth, Blut und Boden. The rejection of the modern world was disguised as a rebuttal of the capitalistic way of life, but it mainly concerned the rejection of the spirit of 1789 and of 1776, of course. The Enlightenment, the Age of Reason, is seen as the beginning of modern depravity.
Scar, for all of his faults, is an incredibly modernist thinker in terms of this lion culture. Fixing the divide between lions and hyenas by creating a union is exactly how conflicts are resolved in contemporary times. In a manner of speaking, anyway, I'm not going to go into geopolitical conflict here. This video about fascism is not the deal there. The hyenas bully the Pride and are responsible for Pride Rock falling into ruin due to their being the enforcers to Scar's regime. Hell, this is even worse in the 2019 remake, which spells out the hyenas are eating the herds to utter ruin, which is why the lions are starving to death. But again, this is about the original film. I don't know if you can argue they use modernity specifically as a method to control the circle of life camp. Maybe Simba utilizes Timon and Pumbaa's comedy antics, but that's a stretch. Either way, it fits pretty comfortably into Eco's tenet, so points given again. Next.
Action being beautiful in itself, it must be taken before or without any previous reflection. Thinking is a form of emasculation, therefore culture is suspect insofar as it is identified with critical attitudes.
I'd almost argue the film goes against this one, actually. Mufasa is, in fact, consistently admired and held up by his strength. Not only is he taken down by Scar, his intellectual foe, outsmarting him, he admonishes Simba earlier on for taking action without thought. The movie is rather plaintively saying the great way to be a king is to show wisdom and forethought when facing challenges. Even in the finale, Simba doesn't resort to violence. He banishes Scar until Scar attacks him, and even then he fights defensively. It's the hyenas that finish him off. So yeah, feck it. First one, I'm not giving a point for. Hooray for not fascism. Next.
No synchronistic faith can withstand analytical criticism. The critical spirit makes distinctions, and to distinguish is a sign of modernism. In modern culture, the scientific community praises disagreements as a way to improve knowledge. For your fascism, disagreement is treason.
Feel this goes hand in hand with the last one and should be stricken off because of that. But again, look at the way it depicts how wrong it is for Scar to go against the monarchy and utilize the inequalities this kingdom has in how it isolates the hyenas. Even if Scar is very obviously selfishly motivated. He makes the fucking rain stop. He causes the crops to die. It's explicitly made clear in The Lion King, if you go against the status quo, the circle of life, you destroy the Pride Lands. While the one thing holding Pride Rock against a typical fascistic regime is that it's largely pacifist, a trait even long-running fascistic countries who made it to peacetime, which is extremely rare, have never fallen for. It will uniformly reject disagreeing with it, and if you do, you're just a jealous, murderous bastard who will be punished by an act of fucking God. Giving the point here. Next.
The first appeal of a fascist or prematurely fascist movement is an appeal against the intruders. Thus, fascism is racist by definition.
I don't feel I have to argue for this one very clearly. The hyenas have been examined as being very racially coded, with many critics examining their seeming status in the animal kingdom, as well as their mannerisms and speech patterns. Zazu literally fucking profiles them at one point.
Oh, young master, one day you will be king. Then you can chase those slobbering, mangy, stupid poachers from dawn until dusk.
And is very obviously afraid of them. This film reinforces this prejudice as being valid a lot. I've gone over this several times already. I don't feel I need to do this. I'm on the 5th of these 14 tenets. Point. Next.
A class suffering from an economic crisis or feelings of political humiliation, and frightened by the pressure of lower social groups, the fascism of tomorrow will find its audience in this new majority.
There's definitely a sense of division within this animal kingdom. You can look at it as having class illusions. The upper class are obviously the lions, in charge, well-fed, worshipped by the masses. The working class in this analogy would be those on the outsider lands, the hyenas living in the elephant graveyard, and rare instances where we see animals forced to scavenge and separated from the plentiful feasting. As Shenzi says, dangling at the bottom of the food chain. That puts the middle class as the herbivores who live under Mufasa and later Simba's rule. They are obviously prey to the lions, even if we never actually see them eat from the Pride Rock residents, but they are content and happy with their lot in life, serving directly like Zazu or genuflecting and later playing with Simba. Timon and Pumbaa are in this kind of awkward position where they're more directly in danger, but they're in relative luxury compared to the hyenas. They also later become part of Simba's inner circle in the Pride Land, so upskill. There's no direct rumblings of these middle class saying the hyenas are going to take over and destroy their way of life. But that's essentially what they end up doing anyway. While the film doesn't particularly grapple with this theme directly, it showcases the aftermath of letting the poor get their way, which feeds into the fear aspired in the middle class that helps fascists win. So point given. Next.
To the people who feel deprived of a clear social identity, your fascism says that their only privilege is the most common one: to be born in the same country. This is the origin of nationalism. The followers must feel besieged. The easiest way to solve the plot is the appeal to xenophobia. But the plot must also come from the inside.
Don't really need to dwell on this one. Hyenas are a group literally getting profiled constantly in the movie, and these fears are reaffirmed by narrative. I've said this a million times already. They literally team up with Scar, the king's fucking brother, showcasing the plot coming from within. This movie clearly has an obsession with a plot. Those closest to you will betray you, and work with groups deemed nefarious or violent. Now, from the inside tends to apply it to the marginalized groups themselves, which Scar is obviously not a part of. He just manipulates them to get his own means. But that small detail aside, this absolutely fits. Next.
Their followers must feel humiliated by the ostentatious wealth and force of their enemies. However, the followers must be convinced that they can overwhelm the enemies. Thus, by a continued shifting of rhetorical focus, the enemies are at the same time too strong and too weak.
If you've heard of any of the tenets from this essay, it's this one. It's one popularly utilized by online fascists on social media as jeering at your foolish, pathetic enemies while simultaneously building them up as an incredible threat is insanely good propaganda. It's why it's not worth debating with these guys. They know what they're saying is ridiculous and doesn't make sense. When we're introduced to Scar, him and his brother size themselves up. The only thing they make sure you know is that Scar is weak. As in literally, he cannot defeat Mufasa in combat.
When it comes to brute strength, I'm afraid I'm at the shallow end of the gene pool.
His strength is almost constantly shown as a heroic good in of itself. Even his enemies admire him for that. I talked a lot about the hyenas being both terrifying and looked down on by the Pride Land public. But I don't really need to, because Scar does all of this. He's foppish, pathetic, weaselly, yet conniving, extremely manipulative, and obviously dangerous. Mufasa's greatest weakness as a character appears to be not seeing the worst in his family, and Scar takes advantage of that. The lesson here seems to be don't be too trusting, you have the weakling beat. Don't need to drag this on more, it gets the point. Next.
For fascism, there is no struggle for life, but rather, life is lived for struggle. Since enemies have to be defeated, there must be a final battle, after which the movement will have control of the world. But such a final solution implies a further era of peace, a golden age, which contradicts the principle of permanent war.
As mentioned, one of the key things the Lion King doesn't fall trap to is the concept of violence being a virtue for its own sake. So obviously it's extremely hard to attach permanent warfare to this, or really any film, because at least before multi-film franchises took over the world, they ended. There is a final battle here. They won and they swiftly move on. You can't even argue it's a final battle this society was building up towards. Scar took advantage of several noticeable blind spots in the society he was in to hatch a plot none of the other characters were aware of until the tail end of the movie, outside of those who were in on it with him. So yeah, no point here. Next.
Every citizen belongs to the best people of the world. The members of the party are the best among the citizens. Every citizen can, or ought to, become a member of the party. But there cannot be patricians without plebeians.
Like, again, we obviously see this with Zazu and the lion's disdain for the hyenas. Not so much for those obviously beneath the lions within the Pride Lands themselves. And most Mufasa and Simba usurp their power by being kind of shitty to Zazu a little. But it doesn't go beyond minor picking on. Also, eating them, I guess. Again, we never see this. Obviously, I can't imagine. I don't think that would be a great scene for a kids movie, seeing our adorable lion friends come down and just maul apart this like adorable cartoon hippo or gazelle or something. Mufasa is close to Rafiki. He shows nothing but respect for the other herds, getting updates on them and explaining their place in the circle. Simba later takes Timon and Pumbaa in. Different circumstances because they raised him after he left home, but still. The outsider thing is here, and the lions are obviously respected as a monarchy would be, but there isn't this inherent resentment of plebeians, as mentioned in the quote. There's a hierarchy, it commands respect, but I don't know if it follows Eco's point, so let's give it a half point. Next.
In non-fascist societies, the lay public is told that death is unpleasant but must be faced with dignity. Believers are told that it is the painful way to reach a supernatural happiness. By contrast, the fascist hero craves heroic death, advertised as the best reward for a heroic life.
Death has kind of a transcendent power within The Lion King, particularly when you compare it to its other contemporaries in Disney. The higher-ups, the kings, the protectors, if you will, live within the stars and look over everyone. This appears to be what happens when Rafiki communicates with the spirits, when Simba sees his father. It's a very, very prominent theme. Having said that, a more comforting reflection on death that rewards those who look after this culture is not what Echo is arguing. Those under fascists crave meaningful death, dying in combat for the good of their kingdom and reeling in the glory. And that doesn't really apply here. I don't need to tell you that death is treated pretty fucking sadly here, even if you want to argue Mufasa doesn't actually die heroically, outside of maybe saving his son. I won't grant a point here, it really doesn't fit the movie's themes.
The fascist transfers his will to power to sexual matters. This is the origin of machismo, which implies both disdain for women and intolerance and condemnation of non-standard sexual habits, from chastity to homosexuality. Since even sex is a difficult game to play, the fascist hero tends to play with weapons. Doing so becomes an ersatz phallic exercise.
So machismo may be read here as people like being manly and tough. And we see one of the reasons Mufasa is so respected is because he's incredibly strong and commands respect, even amongst his enemies. However, that's not really what the point is saying. It more posits this idea that a disdain is thrown onto those who don't fit a strict patriarchal sense of masculinity, essentially subjugating women and non-straight, non-cis men. And I'm sorry, I'm not saying this movie is a feminist masterpiece or anything, but the few female characters we get are treated with a sense of dignity and power. I mean, they're lionesses. That's kind of what happens in like actual animal kingdom. They're the ones who scavenge for the food. Like, there's a drag joke here, but it's more meant to be an endearing and silly way for our lovable comic relief to help the plan and not a source of ridicule in of itself. Not the most enlightened, but Disney have far worse drag jokes. So yeah, doesn't apply here. Who's been on a roll with the last few?
Since no large quantity of human beings can have a common will, the leader pretends to be their interpreter. Having lost their power of delegation, citizens do not act. They are only called on to play the role of the people. Thus, the people is only a theatrical fiction.
Followed leader. He knows what the will of the people is, and he's the one who yields it. And yeah, I feel we comfortably enough get that with Mufasa. He teaches his son the circle of life. He holds it over the Pride Lands under his rule, as the subjects do not seem to question any of this. I haven't really talked about Rafiki outside of maybe in passing, but he's our voice of wisdom and a shaman-esque figure with connections to the spiritual realm. He also rigidly keeps to this path set out to us by the circle of life, and literally gets guided, implied to be the dead kings, on how stuff should be led. This is absolutely populism, strictly adhered to by the ruling elite. giving it a point. And finally,
all the Nazi or fascist schoolbooks made use of an impoverished vocabulary and an elementary syntax in order to limit the instruments for complex and critical reasoning, but we must be ready to identify other kinds of newspeak, even if they take the apparently innocent form of a popular talk show.
So this aside isn't really one that's necessary. It's kind of a funny one in the way that, you know, life catches up with you, or life, you know, throws funny things in certain times. Funny happenstance, I guess is the way to put it. When Yannick recorded this, it was the day after Jimmy Kimmel's show was pulled off the air over comments involving Charlie Kirk. Now, obviously, he was restored, I think, about a week or two back then. But again, you know, a weird reinforcement of this particular tangent is just something I wanted to point out. Good old boy Echo, he was kind of onto something, huh? The Lion King sure loves buzz phrases to reflect on ideas. The circle of life, Hakuna Matata, Asante San, the swash banana. Characters are taught complex moral philosophies to be broken down into easy, understandable phrases. Yes, and this is where I will acknowledge this is a film written to factor in that children will be watching it. There are easy to sum up phrases because this is how we speak to children and break down complex ideas in ways that they can understand to develop their broader critical thinking skills. However, it is how the film wants to present its core themes in a way that sums up life and its issues in easy to dismiss ways, and it leans toward not really reflecting on what is being said in order to just cling on to broader philosophical points. I'm going to get a point here. With those 14 tenets tallied, the ultimate score is 9.5 by my reasoning. Hell, I'll even take a half point away because I'm lovely like that. So 9 out of 14. What does this tell us? I mean, maybe not a lot. And really, this is a simplistic usage of Echo's words to make them a litmus test for a 30-year-old movie's political ideology. I think it's misguided to apply to them in real life in such a calculated way, never mind fiction. It's really similar to the Bechdel test and how this went away from the point the original comic was making to just become a lazy litmus test for does this film pass feminism. I'd rather not coerce people to look at movies like this. Having said that, it is really striking how many of the points it hits in these tenets. I don't think it would apply this easily to other films. Hell, I genuinely invite you to try. Here's my letterbox 4, probably my favorite films, try to figure out how fascist they are. Go wild. It is extremely possible that looking at a film like this one for children no less, that's so ubiquitous, I could play Circle of Life and you'd be tempted to throw your pet in the air, is a little paranoid. There's a video from a YouTube channel called The Sin Squad that takes a similar outlook on The Lion King, but it's focused on Lion King 1.5, and it's more about the Judaism subtext. Obviously, the more fascistic elements in the original come up, because it's a much better and much more thought out video than this one. Most people will probably be more familiar with it because the thumbnail was thoroughly mocked for reasons I'm sure people will get angry at this bit over. But she brings up something called paranoid reading, accepting that her life experience as a Jewish woman may have her read into the film in a more negative lens from this perspective. And I mean, I'm not Jewish. I can't really reflect on The Lion King with this frame of reference. However, with the pretty scary rising of fascism, I absolutely fit into some of their targets. And you likely do the same, unless you fit an extremely limited character reference of people. And if you do fit that list, I'll give it time. At the same time, this video goes out of its way to point out that no, in fact, paranoid readings aren't always a bad thing. She's just really uncomfortable about using these conversations to limit artists on how they wish to express things, ban art, or castigate those who made it because people found themes in their work they likely never intended, no matter how popular the reading is. I agree with all this. And just in case people bring it up, yes, I stole the idea from my thumbnail from this one because it's too perfect not to try to do my own more terrible version because she is an artist and I'm an idiot. So Rab, in the unlikelihood you are watching this, your people should contact my people. I mean, it's also appropriate to bring her video up in reference to this one, as it has a white supremacist version of a song from the sequel used to entice furries into fascistic groups. No, I'm not kidding. No, I won't show it. Watch the fucking video. There is a way this movie sits comfortably with fascistic readings that fascists will pick up on, while it would also turn around and call you insane to be pointed out. Why is that? I initially went into this whole diatribe explaining how breaking down the history of this movie meant whatever flashy themes could be into a non-intentional, found a really cool source, breaks down the oral and written history of the Lion King's production, and, that's very handy. I'll link it below if you want to read it, and I scrapped the entire thing. There is no amount of threat modeling I can do to stop someone who wants to be mad about this reading into my intent or points here. If you disagree with this reading and think I'm talking out of my ass, but actively engage with me fairly, thank you. I do appreciate that. But this is probably not going to be a lot of use, because I've been at the other end and eye-rolling on what I felt was a dumb overreach of a film or TV show I liked. I want to restate that I don't think there's any authorial intent in making this movie fascistic. Honestly, with the villains fucking goose-aping is likely the opposite. And because somebody else will point this out, there are a lot of non-white actors in the cast, as well as a gay Jewish man. Nathan Lane hadn't actually come out by the time the movie made, but my point still stands. They picked up on that. They may not have done the movie. I think that goes without saying, but again, it might be pointed out unless I do so. But it fell into these readings because it incorporated a lot of tropes of Disney and hell, even Shakespeare, that reinforces a worldview of palingenetic ultra-nationalism. Now, plenty of films have been incorporated by far-right agitators, specifically against their creators' intent. One of the most obvious examples is the Red Pill movement, far-right rallying cry based on one of the key metaphors of The Matrix, which has been said by the filmmakers to be a trans metaphor, a decidedly not far-right story in that case. However, I would argue that The Matrix, while a very pointedly leftist film, is a very malleable one where you can easily decide what it's trying to say, as many people have for decades after it came out. Wachowski's later works, even later Matrix movies, are a lot more politically dense and pointed. What the issue with this is, if we go forward believing there is one, of course, isn't so much that The Lion King teaches children that fascism is good. That is an overstatement of harm, and I'm also not pushing it to be white for public view. Even if I thought that was the best foot forward, it is too late for that. 30 years too late to bet on that horse. It's more that story ideas and tropes it relies on can push ideas that permeate our narratives that could reinforce harmful or destructive ideas for those not wary of said harms. And yeah, that's why it's handy for Fox News presenters or errant YouTube commenters to call you crazy for noticing these motifs. You were just overreaching about a children's cartoon to prove something? Your intellectual superiority? Your paranoia about fascism lying everywhere? Disney's world domination plans? Yet some factions will turn around and use the film to goad furries into their ranks because there is something there. There's something in a popular children's film praising monarchy and rejection of hyenas integration that kinda works for them. Even if they'll never admit that. Let's always remember this popular quote.
Never believe that anti-Semites are completely unaware of the absurdity of their replies. They know that their remarks are frivolous, open to challenge, but they are amusing themselves, for it is their adversary who is obliged to use words responsibly, since he believes in words. The anti-Semites have the right to play. They even like to play with discourse for, by giving ridiculous reasons, they discredit the seriousness of their interlocutors. They delight in acting in bad faith, since they seek not to persuade by sound argument, but to intimidate and disconcert. If you press them too closely, they will abruptly fall silent, loftily indicating by some phrase that the time for argument is past.
Tales that lead into their worldview while also giving plausible deniability to make people pointing this out look unhinged. All of this is a good foundation for fascistic rhetoric. This is where we go back to the quote that opened this essay. I don't read the sentiment Eco gave as some admonishment of Nemo or raising of Mussolini. More hitting at the fascist's greatest weapon, rhetoric. Not what they said, never what they said, but how what they say leaves a mark. If there's one thing you can give fascism, and you kind of have to give them something to figure out what gives them such power and influence, while they're not particularly intellectual, they are very good at rhetoric. It doesn't matter what they say, it's how they say it and how they present it. It's why it's dangerous to give them a platform. They know how to abuse it. You look at the Nazis, and one of the things Hitler is best remembered for is his speeches. Most of it really wasn't in what he said, but in his crowd work and ability to hit people emotionally rather than intellectually. He was a showman. There is an artistry there. Twisted, cruel, and beckoning on unspeakable evil. but in art we can examine. I said in a previous video that art is a conversation. Well, fiction, be it books, movies, TV, what have you, is an amazing device for rhetoric. It can express a lot without saying anything. Maybe it's giving us thoughts and ideas by how it's saying rather than what it's saying. Like, I try way too hard in this video to convince you I'm not trying to like cancel a fucking movie. But none of that effort will matter because my rhetoric reflects other essays or discussions your brain has been taught to see as a major threat. Any substance I can put into this topic can be dismissed because I'm just hiding my true intent. I'm Scar, and you're a little baby about to lose his big honking lying daddy. And I mean, the biggest consequence for me is I get some annoying comments, or if I'm really lucky, an unwatchable multi-hour stream in my future. And that's the biggest thing. That's the most unlikely, to be honest. Again, just expecting this video to just kind of rush and go. I do not have a very big following and audience. So, what happens when you use these devices of language, of debate, of persuasion, and apply them to race, or queerness, or class? Seems a lot more concerning. What are greater rhetorical devices, then, than Disney movies? Even if they're not intended by their creators in any way to be viewed that negatively. I've given examples of how they can be utilized for nefarious goals. Well, Brad has. These kinds of elements popping up favorably in our children's media. Again, I don't want this stuff removed, but it's absolutely worth discussing what it could say and reinforce. Not that it will make you a Nazi. I grew up with this fucking movie, and I've managed to dissuade some Catherine the Rye-esque calling, but it's a larger part of an ongoing narrative that's absolutely enticing to those who want to rationalize a less than savory worldview. Like, I think this is bigger than The Lion King. I think it hones in on how stories have been told for centuries and how they can be manipulated. With fiction, you are asked to buy into a fantastical point of view most of the time. Going back to that term, palingenetic ultranationalism, it was coined by Griffin to explain fascistic philosophy. It wants you to get back to a time that never existed. Whether it's intended or not, these stories we grew up with can be used as cudgels to get people to long for a past that never really existed. Not that they're going to be lions, but to return to a world that makes sense to them. A blind nostalgia for a fictional setting they're so desperately wanting to think can be a reality, provided certain elements are removed. Hey, maybe I'm full of shit. Hell, perhaps big stories don't have an impact on our thinking in these ways. Like looking at a figure with inherited power come across as brass and confident with people who followed him. This is, of course, until a massive betrayal and flooding of outsiders makes him face a massive loss and flee. It's okay, because while he licks his wounds, he comes back more powerful and defeats the enemies. He drives the outsiders from the land, and I'm sure he will make the Pride Land great again. And he just can't wait to be killed. Hello there. Me from however long ago it was since I recorded that part of the video. See, my nails are clean. Editing magic, baby. Enjoy my very cluttered desk. This is the penguin from the Wallace and Gromit movies. Friend got it at me for my Christmas once. Isn't it lovely? So people probably realize like this isn't so much trying to like prove one way or another that a fictional property has fascistic intent, because I already think that's how we read fiction anyway. It's more so about like how fascistic rhetoric and fascistic ideas and goals and motives can be taken from popular fiction through general tropes and storytelling that's been kind of accepted from us for a very long time. Because I ended more on a note of like, this is how things may be interpreted and how things may be influencing our culture, rather than is there a way around it. Lucky for me, because it takes about 5 million years for me to do any idea, there are other videos that have discussed this very recently. I talked about Shakespeare specifically. Carl Calgren has a video that just came out recently that looks into PragerU's understanding of Shakespeare and goes into these themes of how fascists and the far right read into his work in inappropriate ways. And, full statement of bias, you might hear a certain voice around that my cousin called leprechaun voice. That's how George Bernard Shaw sounded. I think an even bigger one, more directly going into these themes, is Jessie Gender. She has 2 videos going into specifically the stuff that I could highly, highly recommend you checking out. Also, shout out to everyone who read for me. I didn't realize I knew 16 people, and they all came across and they were lovely and they were able to help me out here. So, shout out to them. If they are on YouTube, some of them aren't, or certain socials, they'll be linked. Don't forget, like, share, comment, yell at me, argue me. As I said, I am genuinely interested in hearing people who may disagree with me about this, as long as you do it in good faith and you don't try to just insult me. I'm completely game and completely open to how you think I am wrong here, because I am very open to being wrong. I'm very often wrong. If you want more of my general thoughts of The Lion King is fascist or not, it's a very interesting overview of the text, and it's something that's obviously been around for a very, very long time. It's not what I find to be the most useful thing to look at it. I prefer looking at it as a meditation on grief and how to overcome grief. I wrote an article years ago about that, actually. I'll link it below. I do think there's a lot of stuff that's like is problematic, everyone's favorite word. And the hyenas especially. I get why people have a hard time connecting with it because of a certain anti-segregationist and pro-monarchical themes that lead into a fascistic reading. It's not me because I love the film, but I get it. Anyway, thank you for sitting through all this. The code word to prove to me you've seen the entire thing. Bob Iger is a wiener. Catch you next time. I'm Scar, and you're a little baby about to lose his big honking lion daddy. Why did I write it like that? What the fuck?